My name is Patsy Parrott. I'm 33 years old and I work at a small estate planning firm in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am telling you this because 2 weeks ago, my sister Bridget slapped me at our parents' Sunday dinner. She wanted me to babysit her twins for 10 days while she and Tobias flew to Hawaii. I said no. She slapped me. She screamed, "You owe us!" My mother laughed. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I walked onto the porch and made one phone call to a woman who had been my supervising attorney for 11 years. An hour later, my mother's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Then my sister's. Then my brother-in-law's. Bridget's last text said, "Call me back now." I didn't. Because Bridget was never going to Hawaii. And the trust fund she thought she'd quietly stolen? It had my grandmother's name on it. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, I drove out to my parents' house in North Raleigh with an apple cobbler I'd baked from my grandmother's recipe. The crust was lattice cut. I'd been up since 6 because my grandmother used to say a cobbler tasted like the morning you spent making it. I parked behind my father's old Buick and carried the dish to the door with both hands. My mother answered. Doreen Parrott, 64, hair done at Salon Belle on Glenwood, lipstick perfect for what was supposed to be a casual family dinner. She looked down at the cobbler. She did not hug me. She did not say hello. Bridget brought a real dessert from Whole Foods, sweetie. You can put yours next to the napkins. People won't notice. I set the dish down where she pointed. I said nothing. This was a thing I'd been doing for 30 years. Setting things down where she pointed. Saying nothing. I noticed the centerpiece. A spray of white roses, expensive ones. The kind with the slightly green stem that comes from a specific florist on Lassiter Mill Road. I knew because I'd ordered them, twice a year for 10 years, for my mother's birthday and her anniversary. Bridget hadn't ordered flowers for our mother since 2017. But there they were on Bridget's place setting, with a small folded card. The card said, in my mother's handwriting, "For my brave girl." I had never received a card in my mother's handwriting. Not one. Not for graduation, not for my divorce, not for my 30th birthday. I knew this because I'd checked once, going through a box of cards I'd kept since childhood, and I had found exactly 0. I walked past the centerpiece into the dining room. My father was already at the table. Stanley Parrott, 71, the only person in that house who had ever looked me directly in the eye when I was speaking. He smiled when he saw me. I noticed his right hand was trembling against the wood. He used to be a steady man. A surveyor for 40 years. He used to draw straight lines without a ruler. I bent down and kissed his temple. "Hi, Daddy." "Patsy, tell me about your week." He'd asked me that every Sunday since I was 12. He never forgot to ask. Even now, with the parts of him slipping, he never forgot the asking. It was a long one. I'm prepping a deposition for Wednesday. You're a smart girl, Patsy. You've always been the smart one. My mother in the kitchen made a small sound I had been trained to recognize as warning. Then the front door opened and the temperature in the house changed. Bridget arrived with Tobias and the twins. My sister, 37, in a Lululemon set that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, hair freshly highlighted, a Goyard tote slung casually over her shoulder. Tobias followed in a polo shirt and Ray-Bans. The twins, Wyatt and Winona, 5 years old, ran straight to my father. "Grandpa! Grandpa!" He laughed and gathered them in. For a moment, he was steady. Bridget air-kissed somewhere near my cheek. "You look tired, Pats." I didn't answer. I was watching Tobias. His polo was crisp, but his Allen Edmonds loafers were worn down at the heels. The leather around the toe was creased into permanent grooves. Real money replaces the shoes first. I'd been a paralegal long enough to know what people looked like when their lifestyle had started to outrun their bank account. We sat. My mother served pot roast. Bridget poured wine. The twins were given iPads. My father asked me again about my deposition, And I told him again, and he nodded the way you nod when you're holding onto a sentence with both hands. Halfway through the meal, Bridget set her glass down. She used the same tone someone uses to mention the weather. Mom, did you tell her yet? About Hawaii? My mother smiled into her plate. Tell me what? I asked. Bridget turned to me. Her smile was wide and bright. Patsy, we're going to Maui, November 17th through the 27th. 10 days. You'll have the twins. I put my fork down. I have a deposition prep that week. I can't. Reschedule it. It's family. No. I said it once. I said it quietly. The room went still in that specific way. Rooms go still when a long-running script has been broken. I watched my sister's face cycle through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, calculation, something darker underneath, something I would only later identify as panic. Patsy, we've already paid for everything. Non-refundable. Mom said you'd help. Mom didn't ask me, and the answer is still no. She stood up. She walked around the table. And she slapped me. Not hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to mark. Hard enough to make a sound the twins would remember. You owe us, after everything Mom and Dad did for you when Calvin left. My mother laughed. A small, almost private laugh, like she'd seen something cute on television. She's right, sweetie. It's just 10 days. Don't be selfish. My father did not laugh. He looked down at his plate. His hand stopped trembling. It went very still. Whatever was happening in him, the part that was still my father had locked something into place. Across the table, Winona looked up from her iPad and whispered, Aunt Patsy, why is Mommy's face like that? I looked at my sister, and what I saw in her face was not anger. It was fear. Fear is information. I picked up my purse. I walked through the kitchen and out the back door onto the porch. I closed it behind me. I touched my cheek once to make sure it was still there. Then I pulled out my phone and called Theodora Lockwood. Teddy is 52 years old, a senior estate attorney, and the woman who hired me as a paralegal 11 years ago when no one else would interview a divorced woman with a community college certificate. She picked up on the second ring. Patsy, what's wrong with your voice? Teddy, I need a favor. Can you pull any recent filings on a trust under Constance Parrott? Wake County Clerk. A pause. Are you safe? Yes. Are you somewhere private? My parents' back porch. Stay there. Don't say a word to anyone inside that house. I'll call you back. I sat on the wooden step and listened to my mother laughing through the kitchen window. She was telling Bridget and Tobias a story. About me. About how I'd always been the difficult one. Even at her wedding, you remember, she barely smiled in the photos. 38 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Teddy's voice was different now. Careful. Patsy, you need to come to my office. Tonight. There's something filed 3 days ago that you need to see. What is it? Not over the phone. Tonight. And Patsy. Don't tell your mother. Don't tell your sister. Don't tell anyone who shares a meal with them. Do you understand me? I understood her. If you've ever been the one your family said owed something, if you've ever been slapped or screamed at or laughed at by people who share your last name, stay with me, because what I learned in the next 2 weeks isn't about revenge. It's about paperwork. And it changed everything. Let me back up so you understand who Bridget was, who I was, and why my mother thought she could laugh. Bridget is 4 years older than me. From the time she was 4, my mother called her our little star. Bridget had a piano. Bridget had ballet. Bridget had a sweet 16 at the country club in Cary that none of my parents' actual friends could afford. I had hand-me-downs and a library card. When I was 6 and asked why I didn't get piano lessons, my mother bent down to my level and said, with the kindness of a woman explaining gravity, "Some children are born to shine. Some are born to support them. I never asked again. In the family photo above the mantel, Bridget stands in the center, my mother's arms around her shoulders. I'm at the edge. The only point of connection in that photograph is my father's hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Just his hand. Just my father. When I was 16, Bridget got a brand new Honda for her birthday. When I was 16, my mother told me there was a bus stop 2 blocks from the school. When I was 18 and my acceptance letter arrived from UNC Chapel Hill, my mother told me she and my father couldn't afford the in-state tuition that year because Bridget needed a car for her sales job. I never went. I never asked my father about it directly. He found out later. I saw him cry once, alone, in the garage. He apologized to me on a Saturday morning. He said, "Patsy, I should have fought harder. I'm sorry." I told him it was okay. It wasn't. But I told him it was, because he was the only one who said sorry at all. I went to community college and then to a paralegal program at Wake Tech. I lived in a studio apartment. I drove a used Civic. I built a quiet career under Teddy Lockwood and learned to read documents the way some people read faces. 4 years ago, I married Calvin Hartley. He was a software engineer at a small firm in Durham. Kind, steady, and patient. We were married for 22 months. We wanted children. I'd been trying to get pregnant for over a year when I was diagnosed with severe endometriosis. The doctor said IVF was possible, but not guaranteed. I came home and told Calvin. He cried. We held each other. We had a plan. We had a savings account labeled Baby Fund. It had $19,000 in it. Then Bridget flew to Charlotte and asked Calvin to lunch. I didn't find out about the lunch until 2 years after the divorce, when Calvin sent me an email out of the blue. He said, "I'm sorry I listened to your sister. She told me you'd been hiding the diagnosis for years. She said you'd been on birth control without telling me. She said you didn't really want children with me and that you'd told her so." I checked. None of it was true. I should have asked you instead of her. I'm sorry. I never replied. But I saved the email. I labeled the folder on my laptop, Bridget Lies. That folder had 3 items in it before this Thanksgiving. By the morning of Thanksgiving, it had 81. There was one person in my whole bloodline who saw me clearly. My grandmother, Constance Parrott, a retired law professor at UNC, sharp until the day she died at 89. She used to take me to her sun porch on Saturdays and ask me what I'd been reading. When I was 25, she told me, "You and your father have the same eyes. You both see things people don't want you to see." The last time I visited her, 14 months ago, she gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Patsy, don't let your sister run anything important. She doesn't lose. She just makes other people lose for her." She died 3 weeks later, peacefully in her sleep. She left behind a trust valued at $1.8 million. She had earned it carefully across a 50-year career, with savings, a paid-off house, and conservative investments she had managed herself. 50% to my father, 25% to me, 25% to Bridget. My father was named trustee. She also left me her notebook. A leather thing, soft from decades of handling. I kept it in my bedside drawer. The last page, written in her precise script, said, "Stanley, protect the trust. Don't let Doreen near it." I never showed that page to anyone, not even my father. I thought, at the time, that it was an old woman's last grievance with a daughter-in-law she had never warmed to. I would later understand she had been writing me an instruction. In March of this year, my father called me from his car. He'd locked himself out of the house. Then 20 minutes later, he called again because he'd forgotten Winona's name. I drove him to Duke Health that week. Dr. Rosalind Beckett, a forensic neurologist with 20 years of capacity evaluation experience, ran a full panel. The diagnosis was early-stage Alzheimer's. His MoCA score was 19 out of 30. The The threshold for legal capacity in complex financial decisions is 26. In the parking lot, my father held my hand. He said, "Don't tell your mother yet. She'll use it." I said, "Okay." He said, "Patsy, if I forget you one day, remind me I always knew you were the strong one. Okay?" I drove home with the diagnosis paperwork in my passenger seat. I locked it in the small fireproof safe under my bed, where my grandmother's notebook also lived. I didn't know yet that Bridget already had a copy. Here is what I have since reconstructed from records, subpoenaed messages, bank traces, and one notarized confession. In April, Bridget came to a family dinner and watched our father call his own grandson by the wrong name twice in 1 hour. She didn't say anything. She didn't comfort him. She watched him the way a person watches a vending machine they intend to break into later. 2 days after that dinner, she sent Tobias a text message that the FBI later pulled from his recovered phone. It read, "Dad's not okay. We could probably move some things if Mom plays along. Worth thinking about." Tobias replied, "Babe, we need real money. Not loans. Real money. The kind nobody asks about." In May, Bridget set up a North Carolina LLC called Parrot Holdings LLC. The registered agent was listed as Patsy Parrott. The registered address was my studio apartment. The signature on the formation document was a forgery, a clean one, with my name written in someone else's loops. I would later compare those loops to a Christmas card my mother had signed in 2021. The match was unmistakable. In June, Tobias purchased a 4-bedroom beach house on Hatteras Island under that LLC for $610,000. The down payment of $120,000 came from a personal loan against my parents' home equity. My mother had signed the loan paperwork without telling my father. In July, Tobias lost $620,000 in 9 days. He'd put it into a private crypto venture run by a friend he'd met at a yacht club in Charleston. The venture collapsed in a way that had collapsed 7 other small ventures that month. He told his wife. He didn't tell anyone else. The mortgage payments on the beach house were due. The credit card minimums were due. The clinic Tobias had told his parents he was opening did not exist. In August, Bridget invited my mother on a spa weekend in Asheville. My mother had never refused a free hotel room in her life. Whatever Bridget proposed in that hot tub, my mother agreed to it. Because by the end of August, my mother was making phone calls to a notary in Wilmington named Bernadette Quinn. They had been roommates at UNC Greensboro decades ago. Bernadette had been quietly reprimanded once in 2019 for notarizing a document a signer had clearly not understood. My mother knew about that incident. She knew Bernadette would not say no twice. Around that same time, my mother began asking me, casually, where I kept my father's medical records. She asked once at brunch, again over the phone, again at a CVS pharmacy aisle. I told her, 3 different ways, that they were at the firm. I lied to my mother for the first time in my life. I didn't know yet why. I just knew the question had been wrong each time. What I now know is that on November 14th, 3 days before Sunday dinner, Bridget drove our father 2 hours to Wilmington. She told him they were visiting an old friend of his. He didn't remember Bernadette. He hadn't seen her in 20 years. Bernadette laid out a document. Bridget said, "Sign here, Daddy, it's just to update Mom's address." My father signed his name with a hand that wandered. Camera footage from the bagel shop next door later showed him entering the office leaning on the wall, walking slowly, hesitating at the threshold. The footage also showed Bridget holding the door open, glancing twice over her shoulder before guiding him through. Bernadette's notary log, which she is required to keep by law, recorded my father as alert and oriented ×3. That same afternoon, Bernadette texted her sister. "He didn't even know my name. I shouldn't have done this. Doreen owes me forever." That document removed my father as trustee. It transferred trustee authority to Bridget. It restructured my 25% share into a custodial trust held for the twins, with Bridget as custodian. In one signature, my share of my grandmother's estate was no longer mine. My father's portion remained in the trust on paper, but with a new sole trustee who had every legal right to invest, distribute, or disperse it. The next day, $50,000 was wired out of the trust account into Tobias's personal checking, and from there to a crypto exchange wallet. They didn't even wait the weekend, and on Sunday the 16th, Bridget walked into our parents' house and demanded that I babysit her children for 10 days, while she and her husband supposedly flew to Hawaii. She wanted me out of town, or at least out of attention. She wanted the holiday family rhythm to absorb me before I noticed anything. She underestimated one thing. I am an estate paralegal. My entire job is noticing. I drove home from Sunday dinner that night and stood in front of my bathroom mirror. The mark on my cheek was already fading. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I felt something colder than anger, more useful than grief. I felt the kind of attention I hadn't felt in years. I sat at my kitchen table and opened a hardcover notebook. I wrote at the top of the first page, November 16th, 2025. Below that, 3 columns. What I know. What I need to prove. Who knows what. The third column was the longest. For 11 years, I'd watched clients lose everything because they trusted family with paperwork. Tonight I realized I was about to be one of them. Unless I worked faster than my sister could lie. My phone buzzed. Bridget. We leave in 36 hours. The twins will be at Mom's. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Then a second text, 2 minutes later. Patsy, don't make me come over there. I didn't reply. I drove to the office. Teddy Lockwood was waiting in her conference room with 2 folders open and a fresh pot of coffee. She looked up when I walked in. She didn't ask about the cheek. She nodded toward a chair. Patsy, sit down. There's a trust amendment filed November 14th. 3 days ago. Trustee changed. Beneficiary distribution changed. Your share? Gone. I sat. I read. The amendment was 4 pages. It was correctly filed. It was correctly stamped. It was, on the surface, a legitimate document. Except for the signature. My father's name had wandered across the line. The pressure was uneven. The capital S of Stanley looked like the work of someone whose hand had stopped knowing where the paper was. She watched my face for a long moment. Patsy, who's your father's primary care physician? I need to know if he had legal capacity on the 14th. He didn't. I have his diagnosis. March of this year. Dr. Beckett at Duke. MOCA of 19. Teddy's eyes lifted. They sharpened. Patsy, we can do something with this. But we have to be very, very quiet. Your sister can't know we're moving. Your mother definitely can't know. If they find out, they'll start shredding. What do I do for the next 10 days while she's supposedly in Hawaii? Teddy looked at me for a long second. You let her think she won. And you build the file. I drove home at 1 in the morning. I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table and built a spreadsheet. 52 rows. The first cell I filled in had a single yellow flag. Hawaii Flight Manifest. Does Bridget's name appear? In the morning, I called Eleanor Whitaker. We'd worked together before she moved into a corporate travel role at Carlson Wagonlit. Eleanor couldn't pull a manifest legally, but she could check booking records if I had a confirmation code. I had one. Bridget had posted it on her Instagram story 2 weeks earlier, holding her phone up like a trophy. I'd screenshotted it the day she posted, on instinct, the way I screenshot everything. The story expired the next day. The screenshot did not. Eleanor called back 2 hours later. She sounded careful. Patsy, that confirmation code? It's for 2 passengers, Tobias Crowell and Sienna Marsh. There is no Bridget Crowell on this booking. She isn't on a Hawaii flight at all. Not on this airline. Not on the partner airlines. I checked the code shares. I checked the standby. She's not flying. I sat down on my kitchen floor. My sister was not going to Hawaii. My sister was going to be somewhere. I needed to know where. And I needed to know who Sienna Marsh was, before my sister did. I searched the name Sienna Marsh on LinkedIn. 28, wellness coach, based in Charlotte. Her Instagram was public. I scrolled. Slowly, methodically. The way you scroll through a deposition you've been told contains one specific lie. I found photos of her with my brother-in-law dating back 14 months. Beach photos. Restaurant photos. A photo of the two of them at a wine bar in Asheville, the same weekend Bridget had taken my mother on the spa trip. One taken at a beach house in the Outer Banks, geotagged Crowell Beach House. The Crowells didn't own a beach house. I knew this because my sister complained about it at every single Christmas. Tobias's parents won't even talk about a beach house. They'd rather give it to the Yale Fund. I pulled the property records. The house was owned by an LLC, Parrott Holdings LLC. Registered agent, Patsy Parrott, registered to my apartment address. I sat very still for a long time. I called Teddy. Teddy, Tobias has been having an affair for over a year, and there's an LLC in my name I never created. They forged my signature. The beach house is in it. Teddy went quiet for 3 seconds. Then we have identity theft on top of elder abuse. That's federal, Patsy. That's not a county matter anymore. I'm pulling Maeve in tonight. Maeve Donnelly, forensic accountant. She also wears a second hat. Adult Protective Services investigator. We're going to need both. I drove out to my parents' house the next morning while my mother was at her standing salon appointment. I had a key. I had been the one who took her to her salon appointment for 10 years before Bridget moved back to Raleigh and decided salon day was now her thing. I went into my father's home office. He'd taught me, years ago, that he kept a paper printout of his voicemail transcripts in a file labeled phone bills. He'd done this since 1994. He'd never updated his system. I found the folder. The voicemail from November 12th was already transcribed and printed. Bernadette Quinn to my mother. Doreen, just calling to confirm Friday at 2. Bring Stanley. Bring the documents Bridget sent. I'll have everything ready. A response. 2 days earlier. Voicemail my mother had left for Bernadette, and her phone had auto-saved to the home line through some old call forwarding rule from when my father had been hard of hearing in 2018. 43 seconds long. Bernadette, just make sure he signs it. Don't ask too many questions. He's having a good day on Friday. There was another transcript, 3 days older. My mother to Bridget. Honey, I told her the medical records were at the firm. She doesn't suspect. She still doesn't talk to me about him. Hurry up before she figures it out. We don't have all year. I read that one twice. I read it a third time. My mother had been participating, in writing, with full knowledge, for at least 2 months. She had been calculating around me. She had been counting on the very thing that had hurt me most as a child. The fact that I had stopped trusting her with anything. I exported the audio of both voicemails. I drove home. I put the USB in the small fireproof safe under my bed, where I already kept my grandmother's notebook and my father's diagnosis. My mother was not being manipulated by my sister. My mother was the architect. That night, Maeve Donnelly came to Teddy's office. 44 years old, Irish-American, sharp-cornered face, carried a leather portfolio that was more organized than my entire apartment. She listened to the voicemail twice. She did not flinch. This is conspiracy. This is wire fraud. This is identity theft. This is elder financial abuse. We can stack 4 federal counts, Patsy, and that is before we get to the notary. She subpoenaed the trust account that night through Teddy. The next morning, she had the statements. The $50,000 wire showed up immediately. alongside the receiving account ending in 0319, which traced cleanly to a known crypto exchange. Maeve looked at me across her desk and said, "This isn't elder abuse alone. This is structured wire fraud. They wired the money the day after the amendment was filed. They didn't even pause for the weekend." Patsy, listen to me. You have enough to file federal. But if we file now, your father becomes a witness against your mother and your sister. You will be sitting in a courtroom in March watching him try to remember which one of his own daughters lied to him. Are you ready for that? I went home that night and opened my grandmother's notebook to the last page. Stanley, protect the trust. Don't let Doreen near it. The ink had faded slightly. I traced the words with my fingertip. I called Teddy. "We do it at Thanksgiving. I want them all at the table when it happens. I want my father to see it. I want him to know I didn't let her win. And I want it done before he forgets enough that he can't tell who was on his side." Patsy, are you sure? Public exposure means your mother will never speak to you again. Teddy, she already chose. I'm just letting her keep her choice. Before I tell you what happened at Thanksgiving, let me ask you something. If you had everything you needed to destroy the people who destroyed you, would you do it at a private dinner? Or would you do it where they couldn't spin the story afterward? Tell me in the comments what you would have chosen. Then keep watching to see what I did. I had 11 days. I used them. Receipt 1 was the amendment itself. Filed at the Wake County Clerk's office on November 14th. My father's signature on it was visibly wrong. The letters wandered. The pressure on the page was uneven. Teddy hired a forensic handwriting analyst named Dr. Marlon Pruitt out of Atlanta. He spent 2 days comparing the amendment signature to my father's signature on the original 2018 deed of his house, on a 2014 power of attorney, and on a notarized passport renewal from 2022. His report ran 14 pages. His conclusion was a single sentence I underlined in pencil. This signature was not made by a man in command of his hand or his judgment. Receipt 2 was the medical record. Dr. Beckett at Duke signed a sworn affidavit. On November 14th, 2025, Stanley Parrott did not have the cognitive capacity to understand the legal and financial implications of a trust amendment. Period. 6 pages, notarized. I added it to the folder. Receipt 3 was the camera footage. The bagel shop next to Bernadette's office had an exterior camera covering the sidewalk. Detective Hollis Brennan, retired Raleigh PD, now a private investigator on contract with our firm, subpoenaed the footage through Teddy. The disc ran 4 minutes. My father, walking slowly. One hand on the wall. Bridget behind him, glancing left, glancing right, then nudging him through the door. Detective Brennan watched it twice and said, "Patsy, your sister looked over her shoulder twice before she walked your dad through that door. That's not an innocent look. That's someone counting witnesses." Receipt 4 was Bernadette's notary logbook. By state law, a notary must keep a contemporaneous log of every signing. Detective Brennan obtained it through a careful subpoena. The entry for November 14th read, "Stanley Parrott, alert and oriented ×3. But Bernadette's text messages, also subpoenaed, told a different story. The text she sent her sister at 2:38 p.m. that day. "He didn't even know my name. I shouldn't have done this. Doreen owes me forever." Bernadette had a court-appointed attorney by Friday. By Monday, she was offering to testify against my mother in exchange for reduced charges. She was 66. She didn't want to die in a state facility. She also told Teddy, through her lawyer, that my mother had told her, "Stanley's daughter Patsy is fine with it. She's just busy with work." I had never said that. I would never say that. Receipt 5 was my mother's voicemail, the 43-second one. Forensic audio analysis confirmed the voice was Doreen Parrott, with 99.4% confidence. The lab also confirmed no editing, no splicing, No alteration of any kind. The voicemail to Bridget, dated October 28th, was even more useful. It included the phrase, "She has no idea about any of it, and her father is too far gone to tell her." That recording was the moment Maeve closed her notebook and said, "We have her on conspiracy. Full stop." Receipt 6 was the Hawaii alibi. Eleanor Whitaker confirmed in writing that no Bridget Crowell appeared on the Hawaii booking or any partner airline. Tobias and Sienna Marsh did. And Bridget's actual location for those days, traced through a hotel folio Maeve subpoenaed, was the Hampton Inn in Wilmington. 3 nights, November 13th through 15th. Paid on her personal credit card. After that, she'd driven home and was simply lying low at her own house, telling our mother she was already in the air. Maeve also pulled cell tower data through a federal subpoena, confirming the same. Bridget's phone never left North Carolina. Receipt 7 was the LLC and the wire trace. Parrot Holdings LLC, formed May of this year, with my forged signature. 43 minutes after the amendment was filed on November 14th, $50,000 left the trust account. Within 6 hours of that, it was on a crypto exchange. Maeve's report ran 31 pages. It traced the funds through 3 wallets. It identified the conversion rate. It identified the exact platform. It identified the IP address of the user. The IP address belonged to Tobias's home office. I labeled the folder Constance. It was 2 inches thick. I kept it locked in the safe. Detective Brennan and Maeve Donnelly coordinated quietly with an FBI Charlotte Field Office liaison, Special Agent Dean Whitlock. Agent Whitlock reviewed the file on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. He called Teddy that afternoon and said, "Counsel, I've worked elder abuse cases for 9 years. I've never seen a complainant assemble a file this clean. We're moving Thursday." The arrest plan was set for Thanksgiving afternoon at 3:45 p.m. The judge had pre-signed the warrants. The plan was to allow Thanksgiving to begin, allow the family to gather, allow me to address the family with the evidence first. Then the law would arrive. Teddy asked me one more time the morning of Thanksgiving if I was sure. I told her, "My grandmother told me truth is a paper trail, not a feeling." I built the trail. Today, she gets to be heard. I drove to my parents' house with an apple pie on the passenger seat and a brown 2-inch folder on the seat behind me. The folder was labeled in my own handwriting. One word, Constance. Bridget was already there when I arrived. Tan, glowing, in a fresh Lululemon set. She air-kissed me again. Her smile did not reach her eyes. It hadn't reached her eyes in years, but I'd never let myself see it before. "How was your 2 weeks of peace, Pats?" I smiled. "Very productive." She didn't catch the weight in the word. She turned back to my mother, who was arranging crystal stemware for a dinner that was going to end very differently than she imagined. The table was set for 10. My father at the head. My mother to his left. Bridget across from her. Tobias next to Bridget. The twins at the corner with a coloring book they'd already abandoned for iPads. Tobias's parents, Roger and Lillian Crowell, who had flown in from Connecticut, sat near the other end. They were quiet, well-dressed people who had financed Tobias's first business and whose opinion of Bridget had always been the chief thing my sister cared about in the world. I sat down at the empty seat to my father's right. He turned and looked at me. His eyes were clearer today than they had been on Sunday. He took my hand under the table and held it. He didn't let go. Bridget held the room. She always did. She talked about Maui as if she'd been there. She passed her phone around. The photos showed a tan version of her in what she claimed was a hotel room. I'd already seen that photo. I'd already zoomed in. The corner of the curtain had a logo. Hampton Inn. Wilmington has a Hampton Inn. Maui does not. She showed Lillian a picture of a sunset. This was our last night. Tobias wanted me to stop taking pictures. He kept saying, "Bridget, just be in the moment." Tobias did not look up. My mother stood up to make a toast. She raised her wine glass to the room. to family, to loyalty, to the daughter who reminds us what hard work and devotion mean. She raised her glass to Bridget. Not to me, not even to my father, to Bridget. Lillian Crowell, polite to the bone, raised her glass an inch and lowered it. I waited until my mother sat down. I cut myself a small piece of my own pie. I did not eat it. I set my fork down. Then I stood up. Mom, before we eat, I have something to share with the family about Grandma Constance's trust. Bridget's wineglass paused halfway to her mouth. I set the brown folder in the center of the table. I opened it. 3 days before Bridget told me about Hawaii, an amendment was filed at the Wake County Clerk's office. It changed the trustee. It removed my share. Did anyone want to mention it? My mother's color drained out of her face like a glass tipping over. Bridget said fast, "Patsy, this isn't the time." I said, "It's exactly the time. Sit down, Bridget." Bridget sat down. Lillian Crowell, Tobias's mother, set her napkin on the table and folded her hands. She turned her head a quarter turn toward her son and did not move it back. I pulled out the first document. The amendment. My father signed this on November 14th. His MoCA score in March was 19. He cannot legally sign a trust amendment. Dr. Beckett at Duke has confirmed in writing. I slid the affidavit across the table. Lillian read it without picking it up. My father turned to me, confused, gentle. I signed something? When? I squeezed his hand under the table. It's okay, Daddy, I'm here. We're going to fix it. Tobias started to stand. I think we should talk about this privately. Sit, Tobias. I haven't gotten to your part yet. He sat. Roger Crowell, his father, did not look at him. I pulled out the handwriting analyst's report. Dr. Pruitt, a forensic handwriting examiner, compared the amendment signature to 3 known signatures of my father from 2018, 2014, and 2022. He concluded the November 14th signature was not made by a man in command of his hand. Bridget said, "Dad's hands shake when it's cold. That's all this is." I pulled out the camera footage still. A printout. My father, hand on the wall, hesitating at the threshold of a notary's office. Bridget behind him, glancing left, glancing right. It wasn't cold. It was 68 degrees. He didn't know where he was. You did. I pulled out the flight manifest, the hotel folio, the Instagram screenshot. Bridget, you weren't in Hawaii. Tobias was, with a woman named Sienna Marsh. You were at the Hampton Inn in Wilmington for 3 nights, November 13th through the 15th. Bridget made a small sound, a laugh, almost. That's ridiculous. I set down the geotagged photo from Sienna's Instagram, the Outer Banks, Crowell Beach House. And the LLC that owns this house has my forged signature on it. You couldn't put it under your own name because Tobias's parents would have asked questions about where the money came from, so you used mine. I placed the LLC formation document next to a Christmas card my mother had signed in 2021. The signatures had the same loops. Lillian Krell stood up. She walked around the table. She bent down and looked at the 2 signatures side by side. She straightened. She looked at her son. Tobias. Did you know about this? Tobias did not answer. Tobias, look at me. Did you know my daughter-in-law forged her sister's name on a deed for a house you've been keeping a girlfriend in? Tobias did not answer. Lillian sat down. She placed her hand on Roger's wrist. Roger covered it with his. I took out my phone. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the dining room. Bernadette, just make sure he signs it. Don't ask too many questions. He's having a good day on Friday. The room went silent in a way I had never heard a room go silent. I let the second voicemail play right after. She has no idea about any of it, and her father is too far gone to tell her. Roger Krell put down his fork. My mother said, That's out of context. Those are Dr. I said, Mom, there is no context where this is okay, and the audio lab certified them clean. No splicing, no editing, just you. I set down Maeve's wire trace, the 31-page report. The page with the words $50,000 highlighted in yellow. And Bridget. The day after the amendment was filed, $50,000 left the trust. 43 minutes after the amendment hit the clerk's desk, it went to Tobias's account, then to a crypto wallet. The IP address belongs to your home office. Winona, in the corner, started to cry. Wyatt put his arms around her without being told to. He was 5 years old. He should never have had to do that. The doorbell rang. My mother shot to her feet. I stood up too, gently. I put my hand on her shoulder. Don't get up, Mom. Let me get it. I walked to the door. Detective Hollis Brennan, Maeve Donnelly with her APS badge clipped to her blazer, and Special Agent Dean Whitlock in a Navy windbreaker with FBI in yellow letters across the chest, stood on the porch. I held the door open. They walked in. Detective Brennan turned to my mother. He spoke calmly. Mrs. Doreen Parrott, we have a warrant for your arrest. Charges include conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, wire fraud, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. He turned to Bridget. Mrs. Bridget Parrott Crowell, the same charges plus forgery. Ma'am, please stand. He turned to Tobias. Mr. Crowell, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and an additional count of unlawful use of telecommunications across state lines, federal charges. My mother screamed at me, Patsy, how could you? I looked at her. I'd been waiting 33 years to say this, and when it came out, it was very quiet. I just stopped lending you my silence, Mom. She tried to lunge for the folder. Detective Brennan was faster. The cuffs went on smoothly, no drama, no struggle. Bridget cried, mascara running. Tobias didn't resist. He looked mostly relieved. Bridget passed me on the way to the door. Her phone was in her hand. The agent took it from her and bagged it. But not before she'd typed something. I saw the word later on the property manifest from the FBI. Patsy, call me back now, please. We can fix this. I didn't. The twins were brought into the living room. Lillian and Roger Crowell sat on either side of them. Lillian was holding Winona. She did not look surprised. She looked instead like a woman who had suspected her son had married wrong for a long time and was now watching the proof land. My father was still at the table. He hadn't moved. He turned to me slowly. Sweetheart. His eyes were wet. Did I do something wrong? I knelt next to him. I held both his hands. No, Daddy, you're the only one who didn't. I stayed at my parents' house that night, for the first time in my entire life. After the squad cars pulled away, after the FBI agent had collected the laptops and the phones, after Lillian and Roger Crowell had taken the twins back to their hotel with promises to be in touch, my father and I were alone. I reheated his pot roast. I cut him a slice of apple pie. He ate slowly. He looked around the dining room as if he was trying to remember whose house this was. Patsy, where's Doreen? She had to go somewhere, Daddy. We'll talk in the morning. I think I did something bad, but I can't remember. You didn't, Daddy. You trusted people. That's not a crime. He nodded. He was quiet for a long minute. Patsy, your grandmother said something to me about your sister once, before she died. I didn't listen. What did she say? He looked at me with a clarity that comes and goes on its own schedule now. She said Bridget would steal from a stranger if it made Doreen smile. And she said you would catch her at it. I told her she was being unfair. I was wrong. He squeezed my hand. I helped him into his armchair. I covered him with the Afghan my grandmother had crocheted in 1987. He fell asleep within minutes. His breath evened out. His hand, in his sleep, kept reaching out and finding mine. I sat on the floor next to his chair until the sun came up. In the morning, the story was already in the Raleigh News and Observer. Wake County family charged in 1.8 million elder financial abuse case. The article was 300 words long. It used the phrase alleged forgery twice. It quoted Teddy. My client's only goal was to protect her father. It mentioned, near the end, that authorities credit a paralegal at Lockwood and Associates for assembling the evidence that led to the arrests. My phone began to fill up. Old high school classmates, co-workers I hadn't talked to in years, a woman from my church, and, near the bottom, a text from Calvin Hartley, my ex-husband. Patsy, I'm sorry, for everything. If you ever need anything, even just to talk, I'm here. I read it 3 times. I didn't reply. Not yet. In Teddy's office that afternoon, the news got better and worse. Better, because the trust amendment was being voided. The trust was being restored to my grandmother's original terms. My 25% share was protected, and my father's 50% was secured into a court-supervised structure. Worse, because I was being asked to serve as my father's legal conservator, which meant I was the one who would decide where he lived now, who managed his medical care, whose hand he would hold on the bad days. I signed the conservatorship petition with my grandmother's pen. The Pilot G2 from her sun porch. Teddy looked at me across her desk. Patsy, you won, but I want you to remember, winning isn't the same as healing. Take time. I asked her, what about Bridget? Out on bail, $250,000. Tobias's parents posted it for Tobias only. They refused to post for Bridget. Her own attorney made the bail. She'll plead probably. She's looking at 3 to 5 years if she's smart, 7 to 9 if she's stupid. And my mother? Teddy looked at me steadily. Bail denied. The judge ruled her a flight risk because of an offshore conversation in Tobias's emails referencing a property in Belize. She's at Wake County Detention Center until trial. I drove there once, not to visit. The conservatorship paperwork required me to formally decline being a contact for her. I sat in the visitation booth with the form in my hand. My mother sat behind the glass. Mascara from yesterday. Hair flat. She put her palm on the glass. Patsy, tell them it was Bridget. Tell them I didn't know. I looked at her for a long moment. I have your voicemail, Mom. 2 of them. Patsy, please. I'm your mother. You are. That's the part I can't fix. I signed the form. I stood up. I turned to leave. She screamed at the glass behind me. You're still my daughter. I didn't turn around. I said it loud enough for her to hear, but I said it to the floor. I know. That's the saddest part. I walked out of the building. I stood next to my car for 5 minutes. I didn't cry. I started the engine. I drove to Whitebriar Gardens, the memory care facility on the western edge of Raleigh, where my father had been admitted that morning. He was in a soft chair by a window. There was a bird feeder outside. He looked up when I came in. Patsy. Hi, Daddy. Did you have a good week? It was a long one, but it's done now. He patted the chair next to him. I sat. He held my hand. The afternoon went by quietly. He didn't ask about my mother or my sister. He asked me about my work, about a case I was helping on, about whether I'd been eating enough. The same questions he'd asked for 30 years. He had not forgotten how to be my father. It is now early December. My father is settled at Whitebriar Gardens. I visit every Sunday afternoon at 2. I bring him a slice of whatever I've been baking. Some Sundays he calls me by my mother's name. Some Sundays he tells me a story from when I was 7. I sit through both kinds of visits the same way. The trust has been restored. My 25% is mine again. The $50,000 that left the account on November 15th has been recovered from the crypto exchange through a federal seizure order. Maeve handled the paperwork. The estate is whole. Out of my own restored share, I funded a memorial in my grandmother's name. The Constance Parrott Memorial Fund, established this month through the North Carolina Bar Foundation. $200,000 to start. It provides pro bono legal support to victims of elder financial abuse in the state. The plaque went up last Tuesday in a small ceremony I didn't tell my family about. Teddy came, Maeve came, Detective Brennan came. So did Lillian Crowell. In my speech, which I kept to 90 seconds, I said one thing that mattered. My grandmother was a lawyer, my father was her son. They both saw clearly. This fund is for everyone whose family stops seeing them. Lillian has been calling me every other week. She and Roger filed for emergency guardianship of the twins immediately after Thanksgiving and have been granted temporary custody. They live in Greenwich now, in the same house where Tobias grew up. Lillian and I have agreed on a schedule. The twins call me on Sunday evenings after my visit with their grandfather. We talk for 15 minutes about school, friends, the dog. Last week, Winona sent me a drawing in the mail. Crayon. 2 stick figures holding hands. One is labeled Aunt Patsy. The other is labeled Grandpa Stanley. There is a sun in the corner. I taped it to my refrigerator. Bridget pleaded guilty to forgery, conspiracy, and elder financial abuse 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. Sentencing is set for late spring. Her attorney has hinted at a plea agreement of 40 months. Tobias took a plea separately and is cooperating with the federal investigation into the crypto venture. Sienna Marsh, it turns out, was a witness, not a participant. She has spoken to investigators voluntarily and provided 14 months of text messages. My mother has refused to plead. She maintains through her court-appointed attorney that she was just trying to help Bridget and didn't know what was on the document. The voicemails make that hard to argue. Trial is on the calendar for March. I don't read her letters. 4 of them have arrived from the detention center. They sit in a drawer, sealed. I may read them eventually. I may not. Bridget called my number 38 times in the first week after her arrest. Not from jail, from her own phone before bail conditions changed. I changed my number on the 8th day. The new number is on a personal-only basis. My family does not have it. Teddy has it. Lillian has it. The memory care facility has it. People have asked me if I miss them. I tell them the truth. I miss who I needed them to be. That woman doesn't exist. She never did. I had been mourning a fiction, and the moment I admitted it was a fiction, the grief got smaller and the air got cleaner. Calvin Hartley and I had coffee last week. Not a date. A conversation. He apologized for an hour. He told me about his life now. I told him about mine. We did not make plans. But we did not say goodbye either. We left the door open. That, by itself, felt like something I wouldn't have allowed 3 months ago. I still live in my studio apartment. I still drive my Civic. I still bake from my grandmother's recipe book. The apple cobbler is the one she taught me when I was 8 years old, on her sun porch, on a Saturday with the radio playing. Last Sunday, I baked one and brought it to my father. He took a bite. He chewed slowly. He looked up at me and smiled. Patsy, this tastes like my mother. It's her recipe, Daddy. You always paid attention. You're the one who taught me to. He held my hand. He looked out the window at the bird feeder. He said, "You know, your grandmother always said you would be the one who saw it coming. Whatever it was, she said you had her eyes." I squeezed his hand. I stayed until visiting hours ended. If you've ever been the quiet one, the difficult one, the one your family said owed something they never paid for, let me tell you what 11 years of estate law taught me. You don't owe silence. You don't owe loyalty to people who built their stability on your erasure. And the proof you need? It's already there. In a voicemail. In a photograph. In a signature that doesn't quite match. In an Instagram story you screenshotted on instinct 3 weeks before you understood why. My grandmother used to say truth is a paper trail, not a feeling. build the trail, then walk away on it. I don't call it betrayal anymore. I call it information. Information about who is safe to stand next to and who is not. Information about which last names you can trust and which last names you cannot. Information about whose hand you hold under the table and whose hand you do not. And I don't lend my name to a deed, to a lie, to a family, to anyone who hasn't earned it. If you've collected proof when no one believed you, if you've been the quiet one in a family that mistook your silence for permission, share your story below. Use whatever name feels safe. I read every comment. And to the next person reading this who is still in the middle of her own paper trail, keep going. The folder gets thick, then the door opens. And on the other side of that door is a life that nobody can sign your name out of ever again. My grandmother knew, my father knew, and now I know too. I am Patsy Parrott. I am 33 years old, and I am no longer the daughter who owes.